Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You are live with Courtside with Lawman,
And Carmen B.
and we are here to talk about the laws and what has happened this week.
Yeah.
To,
News events, possibly.
yes,
A few things here and there, but primarily we want to focus on some laws that are changing and remind people about those laws and how to take advantage of them. So, I think we have to start out by saying that nothing we say or do creates an attorney client relationship between Carmen B and you and the law office of Keith State and you.
and that is true. We do encourage our viewers to either uh, post questions that they have in the chat or to call into the show. You can reach us at 916-384-8204. Again, 916-384-8204 is the phone number for Courtside. And we invite you to call in with your questions or to place them in the chat, and we will answer them live.
Yes. You know what? And something about this week. Whoa, something about this week. It's been kind of hot this week. I think we're starting to get on a hot trend and stuff where it might be 105 by Monday or something. I heard, and I hope I was dreaming, but I think I heard it. And so that means things are cooking. Things are heating up now, getting there, summertime, all that kind of stuff. People are starting to come back out, definitely, and attend all kinds of events, sporting events or outdoor events, whatever it is. So it's becoming that kind of season where also we see somewhat of a rise in criminal cases being filed, things like that, because I think we're going to see that people are going to be interacting a lot more now because they haven't been for quite a while. So you got to learn how to act around each other again, I guess, and stuff like that. But with all that, one good thing that has come up that we're going to talk about are credits that you receive from CDCR, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. They've issued on May 1st new rules regarding credits that a individual may gain during a sentence that they may be serving.
And these are what are traditionally known as good time credits. So if you have a friend, a family member, a loved one who is serving time in a California prison, they would be impacted by this. And it basically has the impact of increasing their good time credit, meaning that they will serve less time and they will be home sooner.
And how much sooner could be, it kind of is dramatic in a lot of ways. I mean, prior cases that we call two strikes, whereby an individual may have a prior strike, but the current case is not a serious or violent felony. It used to be you would say serve 80% of that time. So if you had 4 years, you're serving about 3.4.
That is correct. And now that percentage is being increased. The percentage of time that they serve is being decreased. The percentage of good time credits is being increased. And that is being increased to 50%. So if someone gets a 4-year sentence, they're going to serve half of that 4-year sentence. Now, I'm not quite sure if they indicated, well, let's actually go through the different rates first. So if someone was serving an indeterminate 3 strikes sentence and they had the current offense is a violent offense, it used to be they would only receive 20% credit. As of May 1st, they now will receive 33.3% credit, which means they will serve about 67% of their sentence instead of 80% of the sentence. If there are other determinate sentences, including 2-strike cases, and the current offense is violent, that same 33.3% credit applies. If it is an indeterminate 3-strike sentence and the current offense is nonviolent, their credit is now 50%. The same applies if it is a 3-strike sentence and nonviolent, or a 2-strike sentence and the current crime is nonviolent. As long as it is a determinate sentence that is a nonviolent, those will also be at 50%. If they have a determinate sentence, and determinate means a specific set number of years, and their current offense is nonviolent, they will also receive 50% credit. If they are if they are a prison firefighter or in fire camp, if they are in minimum A and minimum B custody, they will earn good conduct credits at the normal rate for their particular sentence, but then they will receive an additional, find that page, it's 3. They will get, I believe, an additional good conduct credit.
It comes out to like 50% still or something.
I think it's actually going to be in additional. They're going to, because they're going to receive
66.
they're going to
Oh, no,
receive
yeah.
the 50%, but then they're going to receive specific minimum security credits. I don't actually see what those specific credits will be, but I believe it will be in addition. So someone who's in fire camp who would already only be serving 50% of their sentence will actually get some additional credits. So all of that is to say that your friends, your family, and your loved ones will be home sooner. We hope that you are prepared for that and prepared to give them the support that they need, because you have to imagine that someone who has been in prison, and maybe for a substantial amount of time, or even for 2, 3, or 4 years, which to me is still substantial because that is time out of your life. But that person is going to need support. It may be support in terms of housing, somewhere that they can stay until they can get back on their feet, until they can get a job, until they can obtain housing for themselves. And I would say, considering the housing rates in California, it's pretty difficult for a person at a minimum wage job or even a $15 or $20 an hour job to make enough money to be able to pay their rent as well as buy groceries and food,
Let alone utilities. So it seems like and I'll tell you something. Historically, this is what I think Michelle Alexander was trying to address a lot of in her book, The New Jim Crow, that individuals become part of a certain class of citizen as a result of their criminal record, and benefits being denied, and families being stressed out because being put upon trying to provide for this person, and yet trying to also fall within the law of what you can do for them. We know that it's always hard to get a job when you've got any kind of criminal record. It has been the law of California that you can expunge things, get certificates of rehabilitation or pardons. However, unless it's a pardon, it really doesn't restore your full rights. And you may still have to disclose those convictions as a result of applying for a license, a state job, federal job, even county jobs, I believe. They're going to ask, have you had those cases dismissed? The key is that you do report the cases if they ask you to. Now, and when it comes to dismissing criminal records and things like that.
One thing about that in terms of the employment, I believe California we had this discussion before, is a ban the box state.
Right.
So you don't have to, and they shouldn't be asking you about your criminal convictions until they've made a job offer to you. And they should then give you an opportunity to explain any convictions that you do have.
But reality tells us that I think they can still give, they still can make that choice if they're an at-will employer. So it's probably best to disclose if you have to, and if you must, and that's what they say on the application, then you should. It's probably just better to be upfront about it.
I think though with they are not allowed to ask on the initial application. It is only after they have made a job offer.
Then they can ask about criminal records.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it definitely puts you on even ground, so to speak, at least for a while with others. But what we're going to see, and what I think a lot of grassroots organizations are trying to do, are pushing for more 1203.4 expungements and things like that. They're hard to hard to do. You really got to get your rap sheet, and it can take some time to do it, and you should do it everywhere that you have anything that's going on. I'm hoping that the law actually helps us, the legislators. Part of the whole crime relief bills and stuff that have been going around. One of them I saw was about instant expungements. Basically, it's just done on the court's own motion after you have served all your time and done whatever you had to do for a crime. And that would probably be much, 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 much better to just have it expunged without anyone having to go back to court and pay a fee, actually, to have it done. But we are where we are right now. So, since it's not the law right now, I think the thing to think about is going back to change your past. And one of the things we've talked about, one of the big laws this year is AB 1950, which reduces the time periods for probation.
But it doesn't do it automatically. So again, if you are on felony probation in California, you do have to go back to court to get that done. Now I know that there were some counties where where the district attorney was actually assisting people in that process.
San Mateo.
But that is not necessarily happening in every county. It is not happening in Sacramento County, which is where we are located.
Yeah. And I had the experience just recently, a case in South Lake Tahoe, and my guy has an issue in San Mateo County, and the issue became, were they going to violate his probation for a new offense? And his probation was exactly 2 years, 2 months into it when the next issue came up. So he was clearly still on probation. But when the law changed this year now, what their probation department has been doing is filing for relief on their own, so that they'll just
the
call
probation
up
department
the probation department
is actually doing it for the people.
Yes.
And that would actually make the most sense, since probation knows who exactly is on probation, who's still on probation, who is at that 2-year point.
That's right. And so I just talked to the probation officer before we resolved the other case to find out if he was going to hurt my guy, if he was going to file a violation, because we would have been ready to file that 1950 motion terminating his probation at a certain time period, which would have been before picking up any new offense. So I was glad to hear that they are taking a forward step. And I knew that some places were once the law passed. And I think what will happen is this: if you've got to recognize that you've got that motion on the table. So anyone, you're in your second and third year of a misdemeanor, more than likely, if it's not domestic violence, if it's not sex related, more than likely you qualify to have that probation period terminated immediately.
Because the misdemeanor probations are 1 year.
And so even in felony, it's even better. You're on a 5-year felony probation, which you can get for possession of drugs. Okay? And if you're in your second year, past that second year, and you're still on search and seizure, and you got all these other conditions of probation, and just being on probation enough is going to allow the cop to search you, because you give up your Fourth Amendment right to be free from searches. So at that second year, it's going to be very important to go back to the court to file a 1950 motion or find your attorney or something like that to do that for you, because you saved 3 years of being on probation, and that's a remarkable amount of time.
And it's significant, because while you are still on probation, you have to remember, if you violate, you could theoretically be sentenced to state prison. And it depends on the nature of the violation, and it depends on the judge that you appear in front of for that violation, or the district attorney.
Because sometimes, Carmen, you'll settle a case and it'll be for probation, but they wanted prison. I mean, everybody was hollering for prison, and you were able to convince them that, take a chance on this person. And that person's on their third year of probation, and that probation could be broken down to 2. But in all normal senses before 1950, whenever they violated probation, like she said, if you probably could go back before that judge, and now you may be facing prison, and simply because, and it might be a minor issue violation. So it's a lot of risk out there.
A lot of people will say, oh, well, on your probation violations, it's 30 days the first one, 60 the second one, 90 the next one. That is not a hard and fast rule. When you are on felony probation, there is always the chance that a court could sentence you to state prison. So with AB 1950, you have the ability to get off, to end that probationary period, so that you can go on and lead a productive life and not have to worry about the harassment that comes with being on probation.
Correct. And we see that all the time, that's usually the first thing that a police officer will ask. I'm watching tapes last night of a case where the cops are chasing a motorcyclist. He goes and he beats him down the street, but when he drives by, he sees three black guys sitting on the side doing nothing. He knows it's not them on the motor, he knows it's not them, but he pulls up and he basically says, "Where's the guy on the motorcycle?" And then they tell him, "We don't know. Well, he came in here. Are you on probation?" And so that is not even, "Hi, gentlemen, how you doing?" Or nothing like that.
Well,
just came right in.
One of the first questions that they like to ask is, "Are you on probation or parole?"
Now, and everyone, here's the best part, because no one really says anything. And so the officer then, after he learns that they are all on probation, tells all the other officers, they're lying to me. They just straight up started lying to me from the beginning. So, it is a duty, if you're on probation, to claim that you are. However, I've never seen anybody punished for that necessarily, but officers will take that in a very different way, that you're trying to hide something from them that they should be aware of. And so now, and even traffic stops, they go back and they'll look at your rap sheet, they'll look at everything you were arrested for, whether you were convicted or not, and they may start commenting on that with you. And this is why it's always a circle, isn't it? This is why you have to go back to the advice that we give you when you are encountering a police officer. It's why you don't want to say much, because they're going to find out these things about you and probably confront you, try to anger you, try to claim that they should treat you a certain way because you have this in the past and you're not convicted of it. So the first thing you're going to think of is, well, I'm not convicted of that. What are you talking about? And you're going to start talking, which is nothing but consent to discuss your life. And as you're doing so, if you get mad and heated, you're going to think you're a danger to them and want to take you down. So it's why, am I free to go? No. I need my lawyer. It's a basic rule.
And Mr. State Lawman, why is it that other people can get heated in these interactions with law enforcement and they don't suffer the consequences that African Americans do, even when they are not heated during the interaction?
Because I think it's what officers feel comfortable with, who they feel comfortable with. I think they feel comfortable with people that look like them, and most of them are Caucasian. But I think
and so you think they tend to give people that look more like them a bigger benefit of the doubt.
Benefit of the doubt. I don't even know if they ask that question.
Which question?
Are you guys on probation? Parole? Anybody on probation, parole?
I think because a higher number of African American males tend to be on probation or parole. Now we can talk later about why that is.
Right. But the odds
that they think that the odds are greater,
right? And
so that is one of the reasons they ask that question.
That's true,
because they realize that chances are this might be, what is it,
2 and 5? I thought it was like
2 and 5.
At least 2 and 5.
Yeah, so their odds are like, this might be one of those two who is actually on probation.
Somebody's going to be on probation, and what that means is now they can search you and whatever property that you may have, or your home if you're standing in front of it.
Even if you're not, if you're on probation, you don't even have to be at home for them to conduct a probation search.
Right.
They are allowed to search your property, whether or not you're present, whether or not they have probable cause to do so. However, they do have to have, if they are stopping you, if this is a detention, they have to have, what do they have to have?
Reasonable suspicion, though.
Reasonable, articulable
Right.
suspicion.
And something as to why they are encountering.
So probation alone doesn't mean that they just get to stop and harass you at any time
Right.
when you're not doing anything wrong.
Right.
So Lawman and myself have won many a suppression motion where the person was on probation, but the officer had no reason for contacting them, no legal reason for contacting them. Now, Mr. Staten, let's Lawman, let's move it along. There's a new law that has been I'm sorry, not a new law, a new bill,
Yes.
right? That is being considered by the California legislature.
Yes.
And what
Are you
bill
talking
is
about
that?
SB 2?
Why don't you talk to us about SB2 and what that means?
Well, at least I know what SB 2 means is that qualified immunity in California.
Qualified immunity for?
Qualified immunity, which protects law enforcement officers from civil suits, being sued in the line of duty, doing your duty, things like that, will be lifted or relieved or cannot now be used as a defense, which would allow several people, now floods of individuals, to actually pursue civil suits with the hope of receiving some sort of compensation in the end. I believe that the Supreme Court has this on their docket soon. Qualified immunity for everyone, basically, if the Supreme Court comes down and says that's the way it is. But I believe they have it on their docket, and we are going to hope that they do listen to it and have oral arguments about it, and that they see that it's time to make a change. This bill in California could be in effect regardless of what the Supreme Court's decision is, as long as there's no federal law that then overshadows this. So if it's going to get kicked off, you'll probably see it kicked off in many states. They'll be following the lead, and what it'll allow people to do is actually now sue them civilly for any damage done. And we're in the law. We've been hanging around law for a long time now. And when I say even that phrase, it's sort of empty, because the reason they have to sue in the first place is because somebody did something wrong to them, and they did it under what we call the color of authority, which means that we have given them some inherent power over us, and that's what they're using then to harm you. So it's more egregious, so to speak, and it's a shame that qualified immunity would keep people from suing all these years, or at least shade them from doing it. You wouldn't do it. No lawyer would want to take it because they're not going to get any money. And I was talking to a young lawyer not a young lawyer, but a young lady the other day about these lawsuits. What do you get out of these lawsuits? Because she told me she wanted to be a civil rights attorney. Okay, she wanted to fight civil rights and things like that. And I told her about some civil rights lawyers, around the one we know around here in the Bay Area, Burris, Mark Marin here in Sacramento, who take these cases. And I told her that one of the things she's going to have to do is she's going to have to get used to probably extreme disappointment from the standpoint of, you may collect some money in these cases, but you may not change the conditions and the laws. And we all know that money rules things around us. We know that insurance companies and law enforcement agencies and unions, and they all look to being able to fund lawsuits that may be against them. They figure how many lawsuits may be filed, and they have to put it within a budget or something. But they take account for it because it's just money. It never brings anyone back. It never brings them better care. It doesn't make the paraplegic walk again. It never brings anyone home. But it's just money. And I told her, you're going to have to understand that that's what you're going after. That's what you get out of this, is really, most of the time, money. and that's your job, though. Your job is to get that money. You may demand some policy changes along with the money, but many times you're just going to get the money and everything's going to go away.
What is unfortunate is that the civil rights of many, many, many Americans, African Americans, are violated daily, and there is no money that
That's
is
right.
paid.
Right.
And there are also cases where there is money that is paid, but it again can never be enough money to make up for the damage that was caused.
Right.
There's no amount of money that is going to bring back someone, your loved one, that was taken away basically at the hands of an officer acting through the state.
Wrongfully. Yes. So, it was I think it was eye opening for her, because I think she didn't think that far. She thought about the doing good for people, which is what we want. But also it could limit you in a way. And I told her that because I wanted her just to see the other side of it, is that, you could get into this and you could realize that I just worked hard for $300,000 for the family, but they really got, 150,000, and that's going to be split among 6 people. So it's just a little bit of money. And now I can't talk about the case. You can't change any policy or something like that. What reward have you got? So if you truly want to start changing policy now,
And
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say back again regarding the SB2, which is being considered.
Yes.
One other thing that it would do is disqualify a person from being employed as a peace officer
Oh, yeah.
if that person has been convicted of or has been adjudicated in an administrative, military, or civil judicial process as having committed certain specified crimes against public justice, such as the falsification of records, bribery, or perjury. Now, those are the specific
Not
crimes
violent,
that
right.
those are the specific crimes that it lists. I don't know if there will be an amendment to list other crimes as well, but I think that would qualify the administrative process of an officer who a complaint has been made against, and if it is found that he committed whatever the violation is that alleged, that he would no longer be he or she would no longer be able to be a law enforcement officer. Because one of the problems that I
Yeah.
think I heard about, California, I think may only be able to impact California. So I suppose the officer could move out of state.
Exactly.
And that is why we need a federal law that addresses that issue. Because my understanding of what happens is that even if an officer does get fired, what that officer does is just moves on to a different agency and gets hired somewhere else,
Yeah.
and is then again working amongst the public. And what we have to remember is that law enforcement officers, their job is supposed to be to protect the public. They are working for the public. Even when they arrest someone, that accused person is still part of the public that they work for. And
Presumption of
they
innocence.
need to realize that, and they need to apply that presumption of innocence in not mistreating people and not violating the constitutional rights of citizens of the community.
Correct. And I mean, I saw, or I guess when you get hooked on the news stories and you start just seeing them pop up all over the place, I saw the story of a young man who, even in police care, not being cared for, and then allowed to die. It's another situation to where, if that was here on the outside, if someone, you were caring for someone and you neglected them in the least bit of ways, you're going to jail.
Oh, if you neglect an animal
Yeah,
in
that's
a
true.
certain number of ways,
You're
you
going to
could be
jail.
facing felony charges.
Here are individuals who are under your control because they are in this controlled environment whereby they can't do anything for themselves and they are suffering and from medical issues, and you just blow it off or you don't care and they die. I mean, it's even more egregious.
It really is. I would note one other additional thing about SB2, and that is, even though California can't impact other states, it would include that um, officers who had been employed in another state or in the federal government who had engaged in such misconduct would not be able to become law enforcement officers here in California. And so, again, this is where we're going to tell you where politics and criminal law and your political life come together, in that you need to contact your legislators who represent the area that you live in and let them know that you are in support of this bill. If you, and it's, you can, we can Google anything, right? You
That's
can
right.
Google anything. And so you can Google California SB2 and you can read this legislation for yourself. You can contact your legislator and let them know that you agree with it. You can even let them know if you have suggestions on how to improve it, or what if there are additional areas or sections that you want added.
Right.
We have to be engaged. I see. I'm probably going to mispronounce the name, so I'm just going to pronounce the last name, Harper Rua, stating that the struggle continues, and it does.
It does. It it continues on all kinds of levels too. You know, as we see. I think that qualified immunity. So if in fact we go out here and we there's some other legislation when we talk about laws, um, support for the Floyd crime bill, or the crime bill that's been running around Congress. Um, I think the NFL and lots of athletes and people all over are trying to persuade the Senate to pass that bill. It's another place where we have to work as citizens in trying to make movements that hopefully will benefit us all. You know, um, one thing, Carm, it was this week I saw something pretty disturbing. I got to go left on right now for a minute, and I saw an article came out of my home state, Mississippi, famous Mississippi. And it was an individual who had been accused of robbing a bank, a big black guy. I'll just say that's what he was. And he got away, so to speak, in the woods. And there are lots of woods in Mississippi, I'll tell you. And when they caught him, they took a picture of four cops surrounding him. And he was in the middle, and he had on cuffs, hands behind his back, sitting, and they circled him. And and if you looked at the picture from afar, it looked like um, hunters who were showing off their prey that they had just killed. And as you get closer, you'll see, oh my goodness, there's a guy sitting in between them, and he's a big black guy. And there is some crazy smile on his face, you know, almost eerie, goofy smile on his face, while the others are smiling and acting like they were proud of this photo. And I mean, they took this photo and they put it out, and didn't think anything of it apparently, which brings up the fact that if someone can do that and not really think that there might be a problem with you doing that, where's their heart? Are they even operating on a level of human beings and stuff here? I mean, it's a striking picture, because I saw the headline first, photograph taken to cops proud of man caught or something like that, and I'm thinking, oh, what could that be possibly? And looking at it, I see what it is, and I go, oh my goodness, um, this is it a sport now? Is it what's going on here? And why? Why would you take such a photograph? Why? It's so demeaning, disrespectful, and it just makes me always go back and wonder, um, what are we doing? What are we doing sometimes?
Well, I just pulled up the picture because I actually hadn't
Yeah.
seen it, Lawman. And not only are the officers posing with him. But there are, and I have to imagine that those are some kind of police dogs because the officers are the one that are holding him.
Oh yeah.
There are two police dogs that are in the that are in the picture as well, and the 4 officers surrounding him appear to be none of them are African American. It appears to be 4 white officers. There may be one who is Latina. I can't tell. He has dark hair, but it is the gentleman that they are arresting doesn't have a shirt on. He's sitting down, and then the officers are all around him, and then the dogs are on either side of him.
Yeah, it's there's a in the bottom of the article, I think some writer just makes a comment about 1 and 2. Just says wait,
This
right
may
there.
not be the
Okay.
article that you saw.
Oh, that may be the same one.
It may be a different article. It says following the arrest, officers took a photo surrounding him, who was seen smiling in the photo with the several officers and the dogs. The agency has asked multiple, or the writer of the article has asked multiple agencies for the identity of the officers and whether it is their normal procedure to take pictures like this at the end of a search operation. And thus far, they have not responded. But this is not a professional photo. It is a photo that appears that one of the officers probably took with his cell phone.
Yeah, and I mean, they're posing. I mean, so it isn't like just walking.
But again, one of the reasons that is also disturbing is that it falls into that what we see the media doing, and that is presenting the image that African Americans are criminals, right? They are criminals, and we're the good guys, and we're going to save you, we're going to protect you, and we're going to arrest them. Because we're only, again, a very small percentage of the population. So how many white robbery suspects have they chased, and have they taken similar pictures with, and have they posted those pictures for the entire world to see? You have to look at the image that is being presented. And there was a quote, and let me try and find that.
You know what that brings up too is
By
that thing about Vegas. Oh yeah, about Malcolm, but the thing about Vegas and how the district attorney goes for the death penalty. 50% of the time it's for Black people, and we're only 13% of the population.
Yes, like that. And I believe that is the district attorney in Las Vegas.
Right. And it implies, I think, throughout the state of Nevada, they were saying, and I definitely, we had the Supreme Court case about that, about death penalty being used in a racially discriminatory way.
And we know that, and we see that, and this is just supporting that fact, that they are more likely to seek the death penalty when the person is African American. Yes.
And the problem with the leading case, even in the Supreme Court, was that the Supreme Court came back and said, well, you know what, that may be true. However, you have to prove that it was racially discriminatory on this particular case. So they would break it down now to show, so the stats, which would show who is being used in a heavy-handed way, now it's broken down to a case-by-case basis. And if you do it on a case-by-case basis, I'm just here to tell you, any capital murder, they can choose the death penalty. Any, they could. It doesn't have to be egregious or especially egregious.
But they just choose to seek it more when the person in the defendant's seat is a person of African American descent.
And is that discrimination? And why would we cry about such thing? Why would we care about such thing? I mean, if you're not going to be subject to it, why do I care? And and boy, what's the answer to that one, Carm? Why did you care?
We care about it because the law is supposed to be about fairness and justice. And if it's not going to be applied fairly across the board, it should not be applied at all.
Has it ever
been fair? Well, are we going to be real here? Are we going to be real here? Of course, it is unfortunate, but of course it is not. America has not lived up to the standards set in our Constitution. Now, we are trying, but we need to do better.
And maybe it's because
And I don't by we.
we were never.
I don't mean we.
Yeah.
I mean,
We. What do you mean we?
I mean, the we that make up the majority of this country need to do better.
Right.
Not only in the criminal justice system, but in everything
Every
else
facet.
that has been done to African Americans. And that may bring you to what you wanted to talk about in terms of reparations.
Oh. We're going to need a 9-part show on that one. But here's
Just
the thing.
briefly.
Yeah, no, briefly. Here's the thing. You know, people, we talk about reparations, right? And what they should be and how to figure out them and things like that. And there's a lot of people who feel that when we request such a thing, we're actually being anti-American in a way. Because, you know, oh, that will tear down America. And why you want to bring up such terrible things of the past? Because it's now gone. And I'll tell you, nobody living today, no white person living today is holding slaves, right? And or have a plantation. I mean, I'm just going to say just raw dog slaves, okay?
Not out in the not out in the open, but there have been some cases.
In a traditional fashion,
Okay.
we know of slavery in America. That's hopefully not happening anymore. So, if that's not happening, and everybody has moved on, and apparently we have equal rights and equal opportunities for years and years, then what are you crying about? Type of thing, attitude. Well, then don't blame me because I didn't do it. That might have been great-great-grandfather and stuff, but it wasn't me. No matter what I feel today. So, I mean, I think about all of that and I go, you know what? People have got to realize one thing, and I always talk about reparations in terms of, well, what about a lawsuit? What if a country?
We're not ready for that yet.
All right.
We're not ready for that
ready
yet.
to file any lawsuits.
But what you had mentioned to me earlier is that people like to make that
Yes.
claim. Well, there is slavery ended a long time ago, and I had nothing to do with that, and I never held any slaves. So why should my taxes
come
go
out of my
towards
pocket?
reparations?
That's right.
But again, we have to remind people. It did not end when slavery ended. The mistreatment of African Americans did not end when slavery ended. What did we see after slavery?
Well, we saw, first of all, the mistake of giving us the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which made us free voting citizens. And when we did,
What do you mean
by
that when you say the mistake?
Well, I don't know if that impact was intended, because it seems that everything that's happened since then has been to turn back those 3 amendments. Meaning, after the Civil War, it became a need for labor in the South. And there began to be laws passed. Same laws. Yeah. Which would in turn make certain things a crime that you can pick people up on, give them 5 to 10 years or something like that.
And basically just another form of free labor benefiting the state.
The 13th Amendment kept the clause that if you're a convicted felon or convicted of a crime, you can be a slave. Slavery still exists.
And so the crime could be something so simple as, you're in
Loitering.
this neighborhood and you don't have a job. Now,
And now the other things are, well, okay, let's see, you can't live in our areas. We're not going to do that. We're going to separate but equal. Yeah. We're going to say you can't participate in this. And you know what? It's okay for a white person to harm you, to discriminate against you. It's okay. So,
and not only just discriminate, but to actually deputize white men to go into a neighborhood and behave as law enforcement, even though they were not trained law enforcement officers. They could go in with their guns and drag somebody out of their house and do what they could. And there was no recourse because your law enforcement was not going to do anything. Your law enforcement consisted of the brothers, the friends of these people that they allowed to do this.
So you live in terror for years after the Civil War, after this apparent freedom had been given. And so you can't add up in numbers of time. of how damaging this would have been. Because even in 64, which is what, 56 years ago or so, 57 years at most. And like in the video, the guy says, everybody knows somebody 57 years old. So you know that person was living at a time when they had these constrictions in society against them. Where you can live, how you can live, what you can make, your personal freedoms. And even in 64, we did not have a Civil Rights Act until that was signed. The Voting Rights Act the next year, I believe.
Now, again, if everything were fair,
right.
if everything were working like the Constitution required for these people, these conservatives who talk about how we need to follow the Constitution. If the Constitution had been followed, we wouldn't have needed those additional rights, because we would have been treated as the citizens that we are and not as second-class citizens.
100 years after the emancipation, and we're still worried about having civil rights. And you got to go, well, who does that to someone? What country does that to someone? And it's easy to hide down behind the country because, okay, that was those people running the country at that time. Really? Because I guess different people do run the country at certain times and stuff. And I guess we have to suffer when they're not very good at what they did, right? That happens all the time. But there was a consistent 100 years of us never getting a break. We didn't get on top.
There was specific
own slaves
suffering.
For a while.
There was specific suffering meant specifically for African Americans based on skin color.
Right.
I would note, I do not see, I believe it's Sheepdog Protector, or let's see. No, actually, I think it's Mr. Mack, who I don't see him in the chat tonight, but he did email me a couple of events that he wanted us to that he had saw that he wanted us to discuss. And one involved, and I don't know if you saw this, lawman, but there was it's labeled assault with a deadly weapon. A crazy North Carolina judge tries to hit Black Lives Matter protesters with his SUV on YouTube.
Yes.
Now this is a judge.
Yes.
This is a person who, and I'm not sure if he was a criminal law judge or if he was an administrative law judge, but he's an officer of the court, and he is behaving in this manner, attempting to hit people with his vehicle. Apparently, I believe because he disagrees with the fact that Black Lives Matter and that we have a right to protest. Given to us by what? The United States Constitution.
Wow, that document is amazing.
It is, and if only it were properly applied to all of the citizens here in the United States.
That's right. And come on. I mean, go ahead with the next.
There was a second video that was sent to me by Mr. Mack, where there were, and I forget what state this was in, but there were officers who were caught on video moving a security camera. Now, I actually think that this may have been at a white woman's home, but they came to her door. They moved, you see them moving her security cameras, and she opted not to open her door because she was fearful. Like, what are these officers going to do that they would be moving my cameras so that my cameras won't capture their actions?
And then they went out and did something, I guess.
Well, she didn't answer the door.
Yeah.
She did not answer the door. And so I believe those officers are being investigated. But again, how many other times have they done that? And she just happened to, I believe, be looking and see them actually doing that.
Well, that goes along with the recent falsification of a police report. Here, when things like that happen, you've got to ask, well, how long has that been going on?
Well, we know that that's been going on. It's, how can we catch when that happens?
Yes. And I mean, I'll tell you this, being here in the year 2021, being what they may call educated somewhat, it is a shame that I have to think that my law enforcement officers would do such a thing. I mean, I'll tell you, the last 2 weeks have been really tough mentally because it's been a lot. A lot is going on from all phases, and you got to wonder, if I just did my job, why must I have to fake a report or do something to get someone in trouble? Why must I do that? I mean, and that's the question you have to ask is why? Why is there a campaign, apparently, of trying to incarcerate African Americans? Why? And if you answer that question, you'd be lucky. You'd be lucky. But you'll be knowledgeable because the answer is pretty clear. I mean, I think when you start learning your history, when you see something that happens over and over again.
But I think it stems partially from what was the original purpose of law enforcement officers and how were law enforcement officers allowed,
yes.
How were they used, how were they allowed to treat us, and how is that now reflected in what we see in law enforcement culture?
But we saw the mass incarceration movement, so to speak. They built private jails and said, hey, we need them at 80% capacity.
And so how do you do that?
How do you do that?
You make this you make the sentences longer, and that it deals with socioeconomic status, right? And so if you are poor, you are more likely to be in a neighborhood that is highly policed.
That's right.
You also may be more likely, as a result of that, to unfortunately participate in crime to try and get the things that you need, or maybe other things that you feel that you need.
That's correct. And so I don't even know if catch-22 is the right thing, where you really are not going to win, because the ruling power, or those who want to have power over you, will do everything necessary to prevent you coming into a level of equality. You said some Malcolm X quotes, and just because of that level of equality, what Malcolm used to believe and talk about is that the white man will never respect us until we came to the table 50-50 equally. If we come to the table and we're not equal, then they could never respect us, and in a way, that's
but if you
kind of
stop
true.
someone from being, if you and I are going to do a race and everything else equal, right? We've both trained as hard and everything. We're eating the same delicious training meals,
same steroids.
But I'm not going to do the steroids.
Right.
But when it comes time for the race to start,
yeah,
I'm like, oh, what I need to do is put the shackle on your right leg.
Carry this ball around.
And I'm gonna start the race. We're doing a 5-mile race. I'm gonna start the race 4 miles ahead of you. I'm gonna beat you every single time.
Even the weakest person will beat you.
Every single time.
Every single time.
Because they started so far ahead and they hindered you.
Right. Can't grab at both ends because something's gonna break. So, it's like I said, it gets tough some days. We have a lot to deal with, and yet the responsibility for change is actually on our shoulders too. You can't give up whether you want to or not. You have to move forward. You have to be a beacon for something, and no matter what field or area it is in, you got to be that beacon. You got to be someone speaking up for righteousness, or you'll fall for anything. So, the inspiration is there. You just got to find it.
Also, for the young people, have to not put yourself into that trap. That trap is set there for you for a reason, right? You are bombarded with advertisements, whether it's on television, whether it's on social media, that you are nothing, that you have no value unless you have certain material things, and that is not true.
Yeah.
But if you're bombarded with that daily, you start to believe that. And then if you start to believe that, you're willing to do anything to try and get those material things. And so you go out and you commit a robbery. Now you're looking at 2, 3, or 5 years in state prison. Maybe if it's not too heinous,
Right.
They give you a shot at probation,
yes.
right? But add one additional fact to that: use a gun. Or use an item that looked like a gun and have that item not be recovered, but the victim states that the item that was used was a gun. You are now looking at a 10-year enhancement. You go from looking at probation, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years in state prison to looking at 12 years, 13 years, or 15 years in state prison. Well, guess how much free labor they're going to get out of you for that 12 years in state prison? Don't fall for it. It is not worth it. There is not a material item made by man on this earth that is worth you giving up a day of your freedom. You giving up your time that you could spend with your loved ones, your family, your mother, your father, your children, your grandmother.
Who you really hurt? It's your family, really.
And your so-called friends who would encourage you to engage in this behavior, they are not your friends. They are not going to be there when you're doing that sentence time. You're going to be doing that sentence time by yourself. And it is not a rite of passage. I do not believe for a second that it is a rite of passage for any young African-American child or man to spend time in state prison.
In order to show your work, in order to show you're bad, something like that. That reasoning, ass backwards is probably the way to think of it.
Yes, and it just hinders you, and it hinders your ability to achieve. It hinders your ability to obtain a job
and everything, and participate in the society.
And it can become a revolving door, and that is really what it was set up to be. That is why you will hear about this. What is it called? The school to prison pipeline.
Oh yes. By the time, what is it? 8 years old, pretty much.
I think they like to say 4th grade. So fourth grade, you're probably going to be about 9 or 10.
Yeah. That they start deciding how many prisons we need.
We need these many prisons because we know these many we're going to send.
Kids are going to be there.
And let's not fall into that trap.
And and we can. It's easy for us to say. I'll be the first one to say it. It's easy to say, and it's hard to do. I understand. It's hard.
Yes, it is hard to do.
Oh my gosh,
but that's,
if we don't keep talking about not being there, if we don't keep stressing to watch out for the traps ahead of you, then we are remiss. Period. So I'll preach this until I die, because if there's just one boy, 2 boys, anybody out there who says, you know what, you're right, I'm not going to let them bring me down. Beautiful. Because it's what we had to, we both probably had to make a choice at some point in time, of doing something or not,
Yeah. And just, a lot of times I think young people look at us and they think that because we're professionals that, we just started our life as professionals.
I'm all smart.
And that's that's not necessarily true. You have to work at whatever it is that you want. And we did not start out in this world with silver spoons in our mouth.
Exactly.
We did not. We came from working class parents. My mom was a substitute teacher, and she worked a number of other odd jobs. My dad worked in the auto factories, and actually injured his back, and then could no longer work.
And probably came from the South.
And yes, they did come from the South.
The Northern movement and stuff.
And
mine came from the South, Mississippi. Both sides.
Dad was in the military.
Dad jumped in the military and was able to go, and so moved us to California. Well, at least when I was born in 1960, this is when our family landed in California, and that's where they stayed. But before that, traveled around, had to move around.
But they worked hard, and we know what our parents had to endure, because they lived through My dad lived through the 20s,
Well, pick your
the
cotton.
30s. He
Right,
lived
yeah.
through the Depression,
Exactly.
the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. He
That's
lived
right.
through all
All
of
of
those
this.
times,
And
which were not
yes.
easy times for African Americans, and certainly not easy times for African American men.
Right.
And I know your dad being in the military, the same thing, because the military, when my dad was also in the military, and the military was segregated.
It wasn't until Vietnam, pretty much, you know. And he did 2 terms, and I remember well. And one of the things, Carm, you know, that you bring up is this whole community thing. You know, it really took a community even then, you know, to for people to survive and to make it. And now, you know, my parents, their whole lives, all they would stress on us was get your education. Get your education.
Same here.
Because they had none. They had to quit when they were in the 6th, 7th grade and go work on the farm, you know, and do things. And so that was their dream. That was, if I could just educate my kids. And when you really break that down to, if you took in their shoes, walked in their lives, and that was your biggest, that's all you wanted for your kids, was to do that. You would do anything, and they did. You would work different jobs. You would, you know, you got to work with other parents to get child care and things like that. You know, I heard stories later how they used to work that out amongst my godparents and all that. You know, how they would all work together because they knew there was a common goal. We all got to get out of here, or out of the hole, you know, that we're apparently in. So,
Lawman, it looks like, again, we're coming up at the end of another episode. And so the quote that I had wanted to read, and you can, if you have something else, then you're allowed to do that as well. But the quote that I wanted to read from Malcolm X said that the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. Media has the power to influence minds, ideas, behaviors, and attitudes of the masses. And we see this. You have to recognize when the media is being used against you. When we are only 13% of the population, but if you see a negative story that involves crime and it's showing you an African American person, you have to ask yourself, why aren't you being shown the same individuals who are not African American who are engaged in that same crime?
right.
There's a purpose behind it, and that is to make people believe that African Americans are inherently criminal. And that is by no way, shape, or form true.
And I know we got to end the show, but it's hard to reconcile that to where okay, you know, we're not evil individuals. You know, we've kind of taken it, you know, for a long time here, but yet that's what we get labeled as. You know, that's the tag we got to go with. You know, when that's pretty much been the opposite of the way you know, our society has formed. Except, you know, we're brutal to each other a lot. You know, we are.
Everybody, I'm
all
gonna
people
stop
are.
you on there because
all people are. I mean,
yes.
I get it, but I got to think about us. I mean, I'm just, for now, I got to think about us.
So
How,
I'm
you know,
certainly in agreement with that. With
Yeah.
You saying to African Americans, let's not victimize each other. But I don't fall for that whole rhetoric of the black on black crime, because there is also white on white crime. So talk about that.
Let me talk about white on white crime.
I don't
Right
mean
now?
for you to talk about it,
No,
but I'm
look,
saying
I'm recognizing that though. I'm
again,
recognizing
that's
that.
the media
Right.
trying to present a certain image. We
Right.
got to be smarter than that, people.
Right.
We have to be smarter than that. I see a comment from Mr. Mack. He's joined us here. This year, there have been cops being filmed planting evidence, drugs.
Yeah.
Was wondering why the police doing this are not charged with possession. They very well should be, but possession is a fairly minor charge. Certainly in California now. It didn't used to be. It used to be a felony. But I would rather see the officer charged with some kind of fraud or
yes, definitely.
conspiracy or something far more serious that he can be convicted of, that will have a more serious impact.
Yes. And you're right about the film. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of everything come out now on film. And that's why, thank God for body cams, because they actually tell the story of what's happening sometimes that we don't see. The young man in Louisiana is a prime example. Mr. Brown situation, Carolina is a prime example of the body cams telling the story once again of what really happens. And so that media, of just being something that records what happens, is thankful for it. It's why it takes so long probably to make it a mandatory thing too. Because it does tell stories that some people don't want to come out, stories that it seems that some people don't care come out. Like the one who was in the brother had the camera on his dash, and the cop was narrating. Come watch the show. He's telling you.
Well, again, because if they don't receive a punishment, they're going to continue to act in this way. And thus far, again, they don't tend to see themselves being punished. So, all right, viewers, again, we thank you for spending your evening here with us at Courtside with Lawman
Carmen B.
All right, we'll be here again
next Friday.
Same time, same channel. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.